greetings and welcome. Welcome to this wonderful webinar, which is going to, the topic is how to use the AWS Well-Architected Framework to create comprehensive cloud strategy. My name is Parul Chadha. I'm the VP of Strategic Alliances at CoreStack, and I'll be your moderator of this webinar. We all know that AWS Well-Architected Framework provides a foundation to build a secure, agile, and optimized cloud that responds to the speed of your businesses. You want to serve to your customer in the best optimal way, but in the fastest way that you can. And AWS Well-Architected Framework has all the right essence for that cloud strategy. In this webinar, we'll dive deeper into the AWS recommendations on the AWS Well-Architected Framework with two wonderful speakers. The first one is Rich Boyd. Rich, you want to say hi? Just wave. Rich Boyd is a solution architect on the Well-Architected Solution Architect team at Amazon AWS. He works with Amazonians, I love the word, and the customers to evangelize the Well-Architected Framework. This covers a range of activities like partner bootcamps, solution architect training, executive engagements, and with customers, and speaking at events. In his personal time, he's an organizer of DevOps Days in Austin, DevOps Days in Texas, and speaks at community conferences and meetups. So welcome, Rich. After Rich, we have the next guest speaker today from our own CoreStack, Parthu. He's the Vice President of Product Management at CoreStack. He has over 15 plus years of engineering and product leadership experiences in large-scale cloud-based products and services. Being a cloud and DevOps practitioner for many years, he has built products and platforms to accelerate customers' multi-cloud journey to manage and govern cloud solutions effectively. We'll have Q&A session followed by Parthu's session. And throughout the session, as I was showing prior to, some of you guys had joined, we'll hand out, we'll ship actually, can't hand out, sorry, this is virtual, this water bottle. So our marketing team will reach out to the 5, randomly we'll pick the winners. And definitely say thank you to all of you, but and send this out. Each speaker will have about 15 minutes. Should you have any questions during the webinar, please type it in the Q&A box. And feel free to use the chat box to socialize, talk, converse. So please use that chat box for that. We'll have a Q&A session right after Parthu's session. Hope everyone is ready to get started and hear from our first wonderful speaker, Rich. Welcome. The stage is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, CoreStack. This is a lovely opportunity. Let's start with a quick poll question. So what are the key challenges that you face in managing your cloud infrastructure? And we'll take about 15 seconds to answer this question. All right. Okay, all of the above is the winner there. Okay, great, great. So moving right along, this little section of our webinar is called Building a Foundation with the Well-Architected Framework. Well-Architected started with trying to answer a very simple question. And that is, when you look at the workloads your team is building, can you answer the question, are you well architected? How do you know that you have built things in the most cost-effective, most resilient, most secure manner? How can you really understand if the things that you've built follow those best practices for building, operating, and evolving in the cloud? And this question was originally asked by our former CEO of AWS, Andy Jassy, and we have worked over the past 10 years to build answers to those questions in the Well-Architected Framework. So why would you use the Well-Architected Framework? What are the benefits of using the Well-Architected Framework? Well, the first is, by using the Well-Architected Framework and by following the best practices in the framework, we believe and we have seen demonstrated that you can build and deploy faster on the cloud. These best practices allow you to iterate quicker, to get to production quicker, to ideate faster, and to deploy things that don't take as much upkeep or as much maintenance because the best practices are built in. The second reason why you would use the well-architected framework is to lower or mitigate your risks. The well-architected framework is a great risk reduction framework. By identifying those cloud best practices and aligning your infrastructure and your architecture to those, you can shield yourself from risks like account takeovers or cost overruns. It also allows you to make informed decisions. One of the things that we preach here at the Well-Architected Framework is that people don't make bad decisions, they just make uninformed decisions. If you don't know about the best practices for operating on the cloud, building on the cloud, then you will not take those things into consideration when you're designing your architecture, your infrastructure. And then finally, the Well-Architected Framework is an excellent way to learn the AWS best practices and best practices for building on the cloud in general. These best practices have been evolved from the way that we've built Amazon Web Services, the way we built Amazon.com, and the way that our customers have built on top of our platform. So these best practices were distilled from a wide variety of sources out there. So really, think of the Well-Architected Framework as a mechanism for your cloud journey. It allows you to not only learn those cloud best practices, the best practices for building, operating, evolving on the cloud. It also allows you to then measure your adoption of those best practices, measure how you are implementing those best practices, and really show you areas for improvement with those best practices. And then by being able to measure and learn, you're now able to actually improve your architectural health by applying those best practices, by applying those design principles into your architecture. So what is the Well-Architected Framework? Well, the Well-Architected Framework consists of 6 different pillars. The pillars form the foundation for the Well-Architected Framework. Within the pillars, we have design principles. So there are general design principles, which I'll cover in a little bit. And then there are pillar-specific design principles. These pillar-specific design principles take those core design principles and expand upon them for each of the pillars. These design principles then are spread along numerous questions in each one of the pillars, and it's a guided question and answer journey to see how you're adopting those best practices or to surface up areas for improvement of those best practices. And then finally, each one of those questions has those best practices. So as you move through a well-architected framework review, you'll be guiding through the questions and guiding through the best practices to see what you've applied and what you can apply. So time for our second poll. Which one of these is a pillar in the well-architected framework? And we'll again give you guys 15 seconds to answer this one. All right. And the right answer was all of the above. Okay, so moving on. So we'll talk a little bit about the pillars of the AWS Well-Architected Framework. So there are 6 pillars, like I said before. The first is operational excellence. And operational excellence is focused on a couple of key aspects. The first is how you and your business define your priorities and how do you implement those priorities inside your infrastructure. Operational excellence is also concerned with how you build, operate, and evolve your workload and your infrastructure, and really is focused on how you make changes and how you know that your workload is healthy across several different dimensions to include business health and also operational health. The second pillar is the security pillar. Now, the security pillar isn't just focused on, having 2-factor authentication set up on your root accounts and your AWS accounts. It's more than that. It's how do you secure the components of your workload? How do you secure your accounts? And how are you able to audit that security? How are you able to trace events and know for certain that nothing bad or nothing unwanted has happened? The next pillar is reliability. And reliability is really all about making sure that your workload operates the way that you expect it to under a variety of circumstances. Now, those circumstances could be, say, a Black Friday event, or having, or a Super Bowl event where your traffic 10x's all of a sudden. It could also be when your workload is in a degraded state. Say you've lost several servers in availability zone, and you've got to fail over to another AZ. So reliability is all about making sure that your workload is operating the way that you envision it to operate and the way you intend it to operate. Reliability also covers disaster recovery and making sure you have a solid DR plan in place. Performance efficiency is focused on getting the right business value out of your workload. So you don't necessarily have to perform the fastest, but you've got to perform the most efficient way to deliver the business value that your workload is supposed to deliver to your end customers and end users. So it's not necessarily about being the fastest, but it's about being the most efficient. And this covers several different topics in performance efficiency, the way you choose your networking and your compute resources, and also the way that you load test and performance test your infrastructure. Next up is cost optimization. Cost optimization is focused on making sure that you are getting enough benefit and value for the money that you are putting into your cloud infrastructure. So it's not necessarily about paying as little as possible for what you're using, but it's making sure that if you are spending money, that you're doing it to deliver the correct business value to your end users or end customers. And within cost optimization, we talk about a variety of things to include how we choose our resources that we're running in the cloud, how we are implementing cloud financial management and organization, and lots of other topics within cost optimization. And then last but not least, we have the sustainability pillar. Now, the sustainability pillar was launched at reInvent last year, and it is the 6th pillar in the Well-Architected Framework. And sustainability is concerned with how you make your architectural choices in the cloud in a sustainable manner. It starts with how you select your regions based on the energy grid in those regions, how you choose what resources to launch, how you right-size those resources. You may not necessarily need the largest instance out there. Maybe you can increase your sustainability by shrinking your instance sizes to be more sustainable.
Hey, Rich,
so the next thing,
before we move on to the next one, sorry, I wanted to just announce our first winner. I'm just going to pick somebody randomly from the list here. A lot of exciting things you're talking. So let's give it up to Gordon Merritt. He's our first winner for the H2O bottle with CoreStack name on it. We'll ship it to you. Thank you so much, Gordon, and the rest of the team. Over to you again, Rich.
Awesome. Congratulations. So let's talk about the general design principles. These are the big overarching design principles in the Well-Architected Framework. And again, if you want to learn more about the Well-Architected Framework, we have white papers for the framework. We have white papers for each one of the pillars. And we have the Well-Architected tool in the AWS console as well as a Well-Architected documentation site that we'll share in subsequent slides. So the first design principle is stop guessing your capacity needs. And this is super, super important. When you go into the cloud, you should be able to use scientific rigor to understand what you need to run and how much of that infrastructure you actually need to run. So you should have an idea of what your end user demand is going to be, and you should be able to build your architecture in a knowing way for that capacity requirement. So instead of guessing that you may need 20 or 200 instances, you should be able to run experiments for load testing and then derive how much infrastructure you actually need to run to meet your business requirements. The next is test systems at production scale. And that reinforces that stop guessing your capacity needs. So what we mean by test systems at production scale, we mean actually running load tests against what your business performance requirements are in production in a non-production environment. So you should be able to use infrastructure as code to spin up a simulacrum of your production architecture, load test that, and validate that you can actually operate at the scale demands of your business users, of your business needs. So before you launch anything, you should be able to load test it and make sure that your auto-scaling groups are configured correctly, to make sure your instances are right size to meet those demand requirements, etc. The next is automate to make architectural experimentation easier. And what we mean by that is using things like infrastructure as code and CI/CD pipelines and automation to take away the toil that is involved in launching new infrastructure, launching new architecture, and make it easier to make repeatable architectural launches. So you can go from one region to multi-regions in the snap of a finger. Next up is allow for evolutionary architecture. Things move and evolve very rapidly in the cloud. Every year at reInvent, we're launching hundreds of new features and services, and then thousands of new features and services throughout the year. And you need to allow for those new services and new features that may take away the need for certain pieces of your architecture, or may make it easier to create new architectures. The next is drive architectures using data. So we should take data from how we have performed, data from our load tests, data from our observability of our infrastructure, and make changes using that data. We shouldn't make architectural changes on a whim or on a guess. And then finally, improve through game days. And this is where we take our run books and our playbooks, we take things like security events, and we run them through a game day to validate that our business and our team know how to operate under different circumstances, and to validate our assumptions about how we'll react when things happen. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the use cases for the Well-Architected Framework. The first is learning the best practices for the cloud. And this is really what the Well-Architected Framework is all about. It is taking those best practices that we've learned and developed over the years, we've distilled them down, and we've made it to where anybody can digest those, learn from those, and incorporate those into their infrastructure and into their architecture. The next is technology governance. And so the Well-Architected Framework is a good third-party neutral way of assessing the architectural health of any workload. There are different compliance schemes out there like SOC 2, like HIPAA, high tech, high trust, PCI DSS. The Well-Architected Framework gives you a neutral, overarching framework to really understand how your architecture meshes against those best practices, and as a way to govern all of your portfolio of workloads. And then finally, it leads us into portfolio management. By using the Well-Architected Framework, by applying it to your workloads, you now have a way to analyze and understand how your workloads are adhering to best practices and how your workloads can improve their architectural health. So it's an overarching governance scheme that can be used with portfolio management to really see and really understand how all of your architectures, all of your workloads are adhering to those best practices. And we have a time for our last poll. So what are the challenges you have faced in your Well-Architected Framework reviews? And again, we'll take 15 seconds to answer this one. All right. Again, all the above leads. Interesting. Next, I will hand it over to Parthu, and he will take it from here.
And before Parthu starts off, a couple of things. Rich, we have a couple of questions in Q&A. You want to take it right now, or we can take it at the end, since
Let's take those at the end.
Okay. And the second winner is Michelle Dalkin. Michelle, you're the winner of this water bottle. Well, our marketing team will reach out and get the shipping address. Go ahead, Parthu.
Great, thanks, Parul. Thank you, Rich, for providing a great introduction to the Well-Architected Framework, right? And as Rich mentioned, Well-Architected Framework, is a well sought out in the industry, and it is used across multiple customers of ours and across AWS customers, right? And AWS also provides a tool to kind of run through a quick assessment around the well-architected framework. So where we bring in is what we have done on top of the well-architected is, we, as all these require a lot of discovery that needs to happen for you to go and find the issues within each of the best practices. We have brought in the auto discovery and remediation for many best practices across the framework. So I think the first thing is it improves the productivity in terms of finding the issues for you in your cloud accounts or workloads and detecting that and providing those insights to you so that you can look into it and then you can remediate at scale, right? Then the second aspect of it is, again, these are all tying back to the challenges that you've mentioned, right? I saw about 28%, in terms of collecting the evidence. There is, equal number of percentage I saw for collaboration, right? Because well-architected is a great conversation starter when you're looking at your workload and how well-architected it is, right? So, and it's not a single person that does the assessment. It's generally a group of people from multiple teams, whether it's your security team, networking team. So they all need to collaborate, right? So there is a collaboration aspect of it as well, which we help with in order to make this more productive. The third aspect of it is, of course, you might have most of your workload on AWS, but there might be some shared services lying across hybrid or other third-party cloud providers, right? So we provide a single framework to kind of do a well-architected review across your workload in one or more clouds. And finally, we also provide a path to realizing that well-architected, right? So one aspect of it is doing the assessment, but if for you to achieve the workload well-architected, you still need to go through certain mechanisms that will help you get there. For example, in terms of cost, it could be managing budgets, right? So through our products, which are CoreStack, FinOps, SecOps, and CloudOps, we give you a path to actually realize the well-architected as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I do the demo and tie these things together. But I just wanted to, at high level, these are the things that we bring on top of the well-architected. And let me quickly jump into the demo now. So CoreStack, as I mentioned, so we are a continuous cloud governance and compliance platform. And when we say governance, we're talking in terms of, whether it's finance, cost, whether it's in terms of your security or operations. We provide a single pane of experience to help you govern across your whole cloud real estate, right? So essentially, we do this through our policy-based governance, where we have out-of-the-box policies, more than 1,000+ policies that we continuously scan your environment and provide you visibility and insights into issues, and also provide you recommendations to remediate them, right? So well-architected, we also support a lot of compliance standards. Our SecOps product also has compliance. We support all the compliance standards, close to 14 of them. And we have been supporting well-architected for a framework, which is not a compliance standard, but like Rich mentioned, it's an industry standard or a technology governance framework that helps with all the best practices. And we've been supporting that for more than a year. But what we have seen is there is a lot of interest within our customers and across the industry. So we have decided to separate it out into its own module and help our customers with the major challenges in that area, right? So what I'm showing is our existing our product, which has SecOps, FinOps, and CloudOps bundled into it. But what I'm about to show is the well-architected component of it, which we have separated it as a separate product in itself, right? And one key thing to note is the well-architected starts with a workload, right? Whether a workload is a group of resources with one or more virtual machines, or it could be EC2 instances, or excuse me, let me just set this up. Demos never go smooth, huh?
While Parth was going through that, refreshing, let's look at the third winner. And here we have, going to the list, picking up randomly, is Sankar Kumar. Is our third winner. Thank you, Sankar. And then we'll reach out to you. Over to you, Parth.
Sure. Yeah. So as this comes up, right? So essentially, we've been supporting well-architected for over some time, right? So if you look at the standards that we support, there is AWS well-architected, and all the controls that are related to that are available here. And what we do is, as part of the product itself, once you onboard your cloud account, we start scanning it for any issues related to these best practices, right? And you can do that just by clicking on assessment and start the assessment against that, right? You select a cloud account and then you can start the assessment against that. But what we have tried to bring in is a compliance. I mean, I have a backup slide, so which is, I guess, is a good thing. Let's see. So yeah, so if you look at it in terms of the well-architected, right? So the first part about it is workloads, right? So we give you the ability to create workloads, which is grouping of resources towards a specific business purpose, right? So you might have workloads which are, which might encompass your whole e-commerce application, right? Or it could be a workload which, is just, a Redshift cluster, right? So whatever you define as a workload, you can group those resources together, and the assessment essentially runs on that, right? And the way you start an assessment is on a workload. You provide a name, description, an owner for it, an approver of the assessment, along with the standard, right? And we also support syncing of the workload with the well-architected tool. So you can run our assessments in our product and then sync it to the well-architected tool itself. And once you start an assessment, this is where the collaboration workflow begins, right? So there are, like Rich mentioned, there are pillars. Like if you see, there are 5 pillars here, and we are adding support for the 6th one, which is sustainability. But under each pillar, you have questions, and each question has a set of best practices that you need to answer as you walk through them, right? So what we do is we auto-discover issues or, issues for certain best practices and surface them up for you. For example, if you see here, for this specific best practice, there are about 12 issues that were auto-discovered by the platform, right? And then you can drill down into what those issues are and look at the resources that are getting affected with it. And you can actually initiate remediation from right there, right? So and some of the remediations could be manual and some of them could be automated, right? So you can start the remediation and then those issues will be resolved. Again, the remediations, you can do it in an automated way, or you can integrate it with your ITSM tools to work in your system of choice, whether it's ServiceNow or Jira, right? And then this is not a one-time, this is not a process that happens within like an hour or so, right? It requires multiple teams to collaborate. And that's where we bring in the, collaboration through commenting, as well as even assigning ownership, as well as, work to specific members of your team, right? So whether you want to assign a whole pillar to your security team or specific questions to the security team and specific individuals, you can do that so that, they are in charge of going through and filling up the information required for that, whether it is collecting evidence through uploading files or through resolving the issues that are available, right? And as I mentioned, this is not a one-time, it's not something that happens within 30 minutes or 1 hour, right? This for workloads, from complex workloads, it might take many days, right? So at any point, you can actually go and look at the assessment summary which kind of provides you an overall perspective of where you currently stand, right? And you can always go back and click on these issues to go and see which issues are available and then start remediating them. And once you have gone through the process and fixed or waived certain best practices, you can submit it for an approval, right? So, and once it's approved, then you can save that state as a milestone, right? And all this data is tracked and it is also synced back into the AWS well-architected tool as well, right? So yeah, and then that's the primary use case in terms of auto discovery of issues, so that it simplifies a lot of work for you, and then also helping you with collaboration. And many of these controls or best practices, you need additional mechanisms to support them. For example, like I mentioned, in terms of cost, you might need to support it via a budgeting mechanism, right? So our other three products, the FinOps, SecOps, and CloudOps, they support all those workflows and mechanism, whether if in terms of cost financial management, whether you want visibility and insights into your spend, or you want to track budgets, or you want to optimize costs or remediate them. So we provide mechanisms to do it. So with CoreStack well-architected, along with CoreStack FinOps, SecOps, and CloudOps, it gives you a complete path from running an assessment all the way till actually managing it with different mechanisms. That's all I had, Parul. Yeah. And again, all the screenshots were taken from this morning, just FYI, but yeah.
Thank you, Parthu. Thank you, Rich. And demos are always more interesting when they go live, even when you try to show live, and we've always seen something or other go wrong. But appreciate both of you sharing your thoughts. Especially Rich, highlighting how AWS is constantly coming out with innovative ways to really instill the confidence in the enterprise users to really take bold step towards a cloud journey. And I think well-architected framework is a one such great initiative. So thank you, Rich, for providing your insights. And Parthu very nicely presented, showed how ISVs or technology companies such as ours as CoreStack, I'm sure is looking at how this hyperscalers are coming up with innovative services and make it further consumable for the enterprise user. So it's definitely better together stories. I have the next, let's pick a next winner, and we'll pick Sankar Kumar. Sankar Kumar, if you're there, this is, the bottle is going to you next as well. Again, thank you, Parthu and Rich. I have a couple of questions. I think, Rich, I'm going to read out, I think it's primarily for you. The first one comes in is, where does quality fit into well-architected? Rich, you want to take that forward?
That's a really interesting question. So in well-architected, we don't really talk about quality. We talk about more maturity, right? Like how mature is your organization at building, operating, evolving in the cloud? Quality is an extremely subjective measure, and it can kind of vary individual to individual. What we really look at is how mature, how far along in your journey to becoming well-architected are you? Are you at the start of your journey? Have you started to incorporate some of those best practices? Are you now applying those to multiple workloads? Do you even have a well-architected center of excellence in your organization? Right. So that's what we're really concerned with.
Okay. Thank you, Rich, for that part. If you don't mind, just keep sharing that slide, because I want to make sure that I also highlight we have a guide as a giveaway, also as a part of it. Parthu had shared the link. So there is a follow-up. In the chat, there is a question. Is there any cost difference between normal and well-architected framework? I believe probably, maybe Rich, you want to take that first, and maybe Parthu can answer as well. Is there any cost difference between normal and well-architected framework?
So the well-architected framework is provided at no cost. The well-architected tool, the AWS console, is provided at no additional cost. So it costs you nothing to implement the well-architected framework. Right. And these best practices are not like you should run this thing or you should click this button. It's more of, this is how you should think about designing your architecture. These are the things you should take into consideration when making architectural choices.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that was for you, Rich, and that was a good question because cost is always on people's minds. So it's
Right,
good
right.
that you got that. And we love it when, and AWS or any hyperscaler leaders are kind of giving out for free so that the best practices are implemented right from the ground zero. So great. Thank you, Rich, for that. One question, I believe it's for you, part two. How often should you run a well-architected assessment? And maybe, Rich, you can also share your best practices as well. But
Sure.
Partly, you want to take it
Sure.
forward the first? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, right? So running a well-architected is not a one-time thing, right? So you might be well-architected today, but that might not be the case, 1 month down the lane or 3 months down the lane, or even 1 week down the lane, right? So it is important to run it, periodically, based on whenever you have maybe new releases that are happening, major releases that are happening, or there is a change in some of the business functionality. But you need to run it in a periodic way and kind of track and make sure that you're making progress across the high risk issues and medium risk issues towards that. Rich, I mean, if you want to add anything to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, well-architected framework review should be part of your business lifecycle, right? So it's like going to a doctor and getting a yearly checkup, right? You don't know what might be going on. You might have made some choices that have impacted your health, and you should go to your doctor once a year to get a checkup. Same thing with the well-architected framework review. It shouldn't be a one-time thing. You should be going back to those framework reviews, on a yearly, as we suggest, cadence, to really see if your architectural choices have shifted, if you've de-implemented best practices through architectural choices, or if you've implemented best practices.
And that's a great advice, Rich. And Partha, thanks for sharing the insight. We at CoreStack, if I may just add to it, is provide that continuous autonomous governance capabilities, right? And we've also baked it in our well-architected. So it's, Rich, to your point, it's not just, hey, one time we do it, is it a checklist versus are there ways we can enable it on an autonomous way, in a continuous way? And definitely we have worked with, the well-architected team from AWS to kind of incorporate some of those values. Let me just go before I go to go ahead, Parthu, go ahead.
Sorry, Parul. Yeah, I know. Just if I have a couple more minutes, I know we had issues with it, right? Just to show that the earlier screenshots were not, made up. This is the actual UI.
Love
I
it.
think there is some issue that came up, but it's resolved now. So as you can see, there are workloads that are available out of the box, and then you can go and create workloads which are specific to your business, right? So your workload might have different tiers. You might call it an application tier, a database tier, and you can set up the workload that is needed for your assessment, right? It starts with the workload. Once you have the workload, then, for example, in this workload, there are about 608 resources of different types, right? So once you have the workload, you can start an assessment on the workload, right? And on this one, there is an assessment that is already started, and there is about 27% progress that has happened across this, right? So you can always go and view your assessment, and as I showed earlier, like we kind of provide auto discovery for best practices that are technical controls, and we pull up those issues from there, right? So as you can see, there are about 14 issues, and then we have policies that are tied to those issues, and you can actually go in and remediate those issues as you see them fit, right? So I can click on remediate, and this can go start remediating the process. And also at any point in time, you can go and look at the summary of, where you are with that particular assessment, whether it is in terms of the best practices or across each pillar, and how many issues are open across that. Or you can see it across, the questions, right? So how many have been answered, which ones are high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And then again, there is a score that we also provide on top, which can be customized, and each pillar is shown with the number of issues, right? And then you can always go back and look at the 97 issues that are surfacing from the security pillar, and kind of filter it back down to that. Great. I know I just wanted to quickly show.
No, I think this is excellent, Parthu. Love it. Love our tenacity to kind of ensure that we are here and showing them the true value that they can bring into their organization. So appreciate it. With that, let's go for one more winner here. Let me look through the list. Jennifer Charest. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your last name accurately. You are the next winner for the water bottle. Thank you, Parthu, once again. There are a couple of more questions. And yes, please download the guide, ask us more questions if you have. I think those are very interesting. In your experiences with customer, what is the average time for a customer to go from zero to becoming well architected? I think, Rich, I will first ask you this question, your experiences. What do you see that?
So it really depends on the organization. And I'll preface it like this. So normally what we see happen is one person learns about well-architected either in the DevOps team or the architectural team, and they start espousing, hey, this is really great, we should implement this. And then it kind of slowly rolls, and then it hits a wall at some point because there's not enough leadership support. So what I really suggest you do if you want to start your well-architected journey off right is build a cross-functional team with leadership support to learn about these well-architected best practices and find ways of implementing in your organization, in your company, in your workloads. And depending upon your company size, you may have 20 workloads or hundreds of workloads. So it might take a long time to implement well-architected framework best practices on each one of those workloads. But for me, the journey is never over. It's a continual learning process, a continual refinement and improvement process. You're never really done being well-architected. You're constantly looking for ways to be more well-architected.
That's an excellent piece of advice, and I think that's so right. We're never done because it's always going to be some or the other things might come up. So like just most recently, AWS added sustainability as the next pillar, and we're just kind of going to evolve. So I think you're very right. Thank you for that. I have a couple of more questions. If there is one choice to pick up, what does well-architected framework will pick up? Cost optimization or performance? I'm not sure which there is one, but you were saying it, but go ahead. And you are better at this.
So the well-architected framework is all about trade-offs, right? It's one of the core things we kind of teach. Like there's a natural tension between different pillars. Like for instance, cost and performance, right? If you want to make things faster and better, it's probably going to cost you more money to do that, right? So there is a natural tension there between each one of the pillars and across the pillars. So you really need to understand what your organizational requirements really are. Do you need to be more cost efficient? Do you need to be more performance focused? Do you need to be more reliable or more secure? And make those choices based on that priority. And accept that priority might shift over time. Like if you're a brand new greenfield startup, you may be in the customer acquisition mode. So you care all about performance and scale. And once you've matured, maybe you start thinking about making things secure and making things reliable, right? So as your workloads evolve, as your business priorities evolve, different pillars can come to the fore and be more important than others. And just understand that and accept that.
Thank you. I think that's great insight. And Parthu, anything more you want to add up on that? What is your experiences or our customers are seeing it?
No, I think Rich nailed it, Parul, right? There's always a natural tension between the two, but it depends on what is the trade-off and what is your RPO, RTO, and some of your business strategy and your technical strategy around that.
One more, how do you handle conflicting non-functional requirements and whether suggestions are given, for example, how improving performance may impact reliability? I think that's true. And how well-architected framework is aligned with architecture methods like ATAM 3.0. Rich, you want to take that first?
Sure. So non-functional requirements are going to shift and evolve over time. And what I can tell you is you should look at the 6 pillars and just rank them 1 to 6 in order of priority based on your business needs. And then use that as your North Star when you hit a block in the road and you have to choose between, say reliability and security or performance and cost, right? And use that to make those, break those ties, right? And then accept that you should revisit that priority every year when you conduct your update of your well-architected framework review, right? And be very prescient about that. When it comes to other, and I'll cover compliance regimes also. So when it comes to compliance regimes or other architectural choice selection frameworks, well-architected tries to be agnostic of those things. You will see similar best practices pop up that will be reflected in different compliance regimes or architectural choice selection regimes. But the goal of well-architected is to be specifically focused on cloud best practices and not to dive too deep into saying, well, to be well-architected for NIST, you need to do these things, right? You should be able to take your existing compliance regime and layer that on top of the well-architected framework, and there should be no conflicts.
Right, and just to add to that, I mean, you can take well-architected as a starting point, right? But every organization has their own best practices and requirements that they have built over considerable amount of time, right? So you can overlay your best practices on top of well-architected. Some of the best practices for well-architected might not make sense for you, so you can remove certain items and you can add your own best practices and questions related to that. And that's where we also support like custom standards, custom frameworks, where you can take well-architected as a starting point and enhance it to your needs for your organization, right? So essentially, that's one way of handling it.
Scrollings, okay. Thank you, Parthu and Rich. Top factors to consider this well-architected framework review and how often it is done. I think probably you've covered it, you guys, but maybe Parthu, you wanna add based on our experiences? What are the key factors to consider with this well-architected framework review?
I mean, so I think so. It's not a one-time process, right? It's a continuous process, and essentially, it can be done on a periodic basis. Like it could be a way of dealing. It might be every 3 months you might want to run through a well-architected review for your workload, or it could be at certain major releases, like I mentioned, or certain changes in the business strategy that affects your technology stack, right? So it depends on the workload and it depends on the organization, right? But it should be a continuous journey, right? It's not a one time you say you're well architected and done with that, right? So, and that's where milestones come into picture, and you can save the state of your existing state as a milestone, and then you can compare it as you go along with the next round of assessment and see how you fare with that and make sure you're better or at equal to where you were before.
Sure. Hey, Rich, the more and more I hear and look at all these questions that generic about it, really getting more educated about when to apply well-architected, or is there like a formula? I think that's what I'm kind of guessing some of the questions that I see. Are there best practices for best practices, right? Because well-architected is best practices for entire cloud journey. Now, people are now starting to really digest it and learn it and understand, but now they want more best practices. So actually, this is my question for Rich, actually, to say, hey, is AWS, Amazon is thinking about industry-based best practices for well-architected? And we're not talking about compliance, creating other compliance standards, but just, any other thoughts, ideas where, people are able to bite-size, right? And chew on it one step at a time. Any thoughts on that, Rich?
So when you conduct your first well-architected framework review, there's going to be a lot of high risk and medium risk issues. And it is going to be overwhelming. To everybody new to well-architected, it is overwhelming. So don't feel like you're alone in the universe. Everybody goes through this. What I would say is pick the pillar most important to you. And within that pillar, pick like three high risk issues. Pick the top 3 things that would provide maximal impact with minimal effort, right? The low hanging fruit, and tackle those and start there, right? You gotta eat the elephant from the tail, so to speak, right? And it's going to take a while. You're not going to get through all the high risk issues in a week or in a month. It might take a year or years in some cases, right? But just start small, start simple, and iterate from there. Incorporate that HR and mitigation into your monthly cadences, right? Or your bi-weekly cadences, and incorporate improvement that way.
No, that's very helpful. One last question. Okay, sorry. I have a couple of more, and we have to take this. And before that, I'll just say then the final fifth winner is David Kormashov. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. You are our fifth winner for this water bottle. Actually, there are a couple of questions, Rich. You can also see it in the Q&A. Two-part question. Are you able to incorporate the lenses separately in your tool? Rich, just for you, I think AWS launched the lens, right?
So we have lenses in the tool, the SaaS lens, the serverless lens, and the FTR lens are available in the tool. But at reInvent, we also launched a new feature called custom question sets. And custom question sets allow you to create your own, essentially well-architected lenses, and then apply those to multiple accounts, share those out to multiple accounts. So if there are a couple of questions that you want to make sure that workload owners are answering, or best practices you want people to implement in your organization, you can create your own custom question set and then share those out across accounts.
Awesome. And the second part to that question is also AWS announced custom lenses at reInvent. And so basically you just answered that question as well. So great. One more last question. I know we're way above 45 minutes, 30. Is there a mapping between ISO 27001, SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, and well-architected frameworks?
Rich, I have seen some people attempt to do this, right? And what I will say is I would treat the well-architected framework as a separate thing, right? You can apply the well-architected framework to whatever workload you want to, regardless of what compliance scheme or audit scheme you have to incorporate, right? The well-architected is just another layer of best practices that is universal to the way we build, operate, and evolve on the cloud. I'm sure somebody smarter than me has tried to create that mapping, but in what we try to do in the well-architected framework is be neutral to that, right? We don't want to say that to be well-architected, you need to be PCI DSS compliant, or you need to be SOC 2 compliant, right? We try to avoid that.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, Rich, I mean, like,
in
CoreStack, essentially we do that. We kind of have an abstracted cloud, controls where you run the policies one time and all the controls are mapped between each of the standards, whether it's compliance or industry frameworks, and then you just run one time and you get a posture across different compliance or industry or best practice standards, right? But like you said, I mean, we are also separating those out into compliance based only, and then well-architected best practices, because some of the best practices, even though there is a mapping, they might not correlate into compliance, right? So, but we do have that abstracted abstraction available in the platform today.
Yeah, thank you, Partha. Thank you, Rich. And I think the one last question I'll take: are there any templates for question sets you just mentioned? And maybe Partha, you want to take that forward first, because I know in our tool we're kind of baking in. It's all about experiences, right? What is the best experience we can offer to the enterprise users? So I think the questions around, have we templatized some of the question sets?
I think, I mean, the templates essentially are the different lenses and the standards itself, right? And I think those are the starting points. But then if every organization has their own list of questions, right? That's where we want to provide the flexibility to add your own questions and best practices, right? So I don't know if I answered that the right way, but essentially the standards and the lenses are a way of, templatizing the questions itself, right? Those come out of the box. And then if you want to add few based on your organization needs, you can always delete a few and add the ones that make sense for you.
Rich, anything more you want to add to that question? Are there any templates for question sets you just mentioned?
I can tell you that we're working on a GitHub repository that will be open source, that will contain some custom question set samples that people can apply. And one of the things that we are planning on doing is with the lenses that are out there that are not yet in the tool, we are talking about publishing those lenses as custom question sets so that you can apply those to your workload.
Awesome, thanks. And I do see, like in a chat box, Rich mentioned that yes, honestly, this is at a minimum. Yeah, I think good advisors. So I just saw that on chat. Any anything else that sample templates? Okay, the question is followed up on the templates for the questions. Are there any sample templates, Rich and Partha?
Yeah, like I said,
Right.
we're working on a GitHub repository that'll have several custom question sets, examples you can use. You can also download the JSON template inside of the AWS Well-Architected tool, and it's well documented on how to build a custom question set. It's pretty easy.
Awesome. Anything else, Partha, at the templates front you want to cover?
I think it's great to learn that the new custom templates that will be available, and then we'll adopt and make it available as part of the tool itself as well.
Awesome. I really wanted to thank the audience, thank the speakers, but before that, I want to make sure that Partha and Rich, any last minute thoughts based on the participation? We've got great passion going on around here on Well Architected. Anything else that you want to 30 seconds, 60 seconds for our audience? Partha, since you're on the camera right now, maybe you can go ahead and share your 30, 60 seconds advices, experiences.
Sure, Parul. Yeah, I think first thing is I was excited to see the challenges, right? So like all the challenges were, were important for, at least I said 30%, and all the above were about 50%, right? Which is good to see. But in terms of, approaching the well-architected itself, like I think Rich mentioned it clearly that, it's a process and it cannot be done in an hour or half an hour and just get done with it. So I think we need to be diligent and start small, start with the pillar that is important to you, and kind of run through what are the high risk issues and the medium risk issues and try to closing them one by one. And you can start with a simple workload and then go to more complex workloads, right? And then again, so the framework is well set in place. Tools, whether it's well architected or CoreStack well architected, which is complementary tool on top of it, are just, they accelerate your path towards that, right? But again, it's a process. It's not, tool can only help. It's a process, and it needs to be diligent about it, and it has to be done in a continuous way.
Partha, anything more? 30 seconds, 60 seconds, Rich, for the audience?
Yeah, start with the white paper. So read the Well-Architected Framework white paper, the core white paper, and just start there, right? Again, it's going to take time to learn these best practices. And once you've learned them, once you understand them, then you can really start to think about measuring your workloads against them and improving your workloads against them. The other thing that I'll say is that when you conduct a well-architected framework review and you've got high risk and medium risk issues, a lot of times we see the high risk and medium risk issues are not particular to a workload. They are particular to how an organization makes decisions or does things. So the improvements you can come up with for one workload generally apply to other workloads as well. And it creates a kind of flywheel effect. So think about that as you start your well-architected journey.
Well, thank you both. Wonderful advices and lessons that you've shared. Thank you, audience. Great participation. Again, we always go above our time frame, which is really good to know and appreciate. Please email to, the emails are written here at CoreStack. Happy to take, questions also. And Rich will definitely help us out. Also, if there are specific questions, I can take it for Rich and reach out to Rich and give it, respond back to you guys. Again, thank you and have a wonderful day across the globe. It's a sign off. Bye.
Thank you.